She was just a little girl, walking alone in the park with her dog. No noise, no drama, just peace, until a man on a loud motorcycle pulled up, smirking, laughing, and then, without warning, he kicked her dog. Hard, like it was funny, like no one would care, but what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this wasn't just a dog. He had just kicked a trained K-9 officer, one with a badge, one with a past. One with more discipline, loyalty, and purpose than he'd ever know in his life, and in that single moment, he didn't just hurt a child's best friend, he ignited something far bigger than himself, because what happened next didn't just shock the people watching, it shook the internet, it changed laws, it transformed the life of a silent little girl, and turned a forgotten dog into a national symbol of courage. This isn't just a story about cruelty, it's a story about what happens when loyalty stands up to ignorance, when a hero doesn't wear armor, but fur, and when a little girl finds her voice, because one dog refused to let her suffer in silence. Stay with me, because what you're about to see will break your heart, but by the end, it just might restore your faith in the world. He laughed when he kicked the dog, like it was some harmless prank. Like pain was a punchline, but what he didn't know was that this wasn't just a dog, and that little girl holding the leash, she wasn't just some kid in the park. She was about to change everything. It started on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the world feels safe, where parents sip coffee and kids ride bikes, where dogs chase butterflies and the sun feels soft on your skin. But for Lily, that morning was about more than sunshine. She was walking her best friend, Shadow, a beautiful black and tan German shepherd. To most, he looked like any loyal companion, but to Lily, he was her lifeline. And to those who knew the truth, Shadow was more than a pet. He was a trained K-9 service dog assigned to protect her after tragedy struck her family months ago. Lily had seen more pain in her short life than most adults. After losing her father in a hit and run, she stopped speaking for weeks. Therapists tried, doctors tried, but nothing brought her peace. Until they introduced her to Shadow, a dog trained not just to obey, but to heal, protect, and defend. That morning, as they walked along the park path, Shadow stayed close, eyes alert, ears perked, but to any stranger, it looked like a girl and her dog, enjoying a morning stroll. Then came the sound of the motorcycle. Loud, unbothered, roaring through the calm like it owned the world. He pulled up with arrogance, leather jacket, cigarette breath, the kind of guy who believed fear was power. He saw Lily, he saw Shadow, and he smirked. Nice mutt, he scoffed. Lily didn't respond. She just kept walking, but that only fed his ego. He dismounted slowly, like he wanted to be noticed, like the whole world needed to watch whatever he did next. And then he stepped forward, and in one reckless move, he kicked Shadow hard in the side. Lily screamed, the sound of heartbreak, of fear, of betrayal. Shadow stumbled, but he didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He turned slowly, locked eyes with the man, and stood in front of Lily. Not as a pet, as a protector. The biker laughed. Relax, kid. It's just a dog. But what he didn't know was what kind of dog Shadow really was. He didn't know Shadow was trained by law enforcement professionals. Didn't know he could read body language, detect stress, and react in seconds. Didn't know he had the instincts of a soldier and the heart of a guardian. Before he could say another word, a voice rang out from across the park, sharp, commanding, "Step away from the child, now." The biker turned, confused. A woman in uniform approached fast. She wasn't just a jogger or a bystander. She was Lily's mother, and more than that, she was a retired K-9 officer herself. She had been watching from a distance, letting Lily take her first solo walk with Shadow, a small step toward independence. But now her instincts kicked in. She rushed over, hand on her badge, fury in her eyes. "You just assaulted a registered K-9 service dog," she said. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The biker froze. His smirk began to fade. "Relax, lady. It was just a joke." But this wasn't a joke. Not to Lily, not to her mother, and certainly not to Shadow, who still stood firm, unwavering. eyes locked on the man like he was calculating every breath. The officer pulled out her phone. "This park has surveillance. I'm calling it in." The biker shifted, suddenly unsure, suddenly not so brave. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "You're seriously calling the cops over a dog?" She didn't flinch. "That dog has more training, discipline, and purpose than you've probably had in your entire life." People were watching now, phones out, recording, the moment spreading like wildfire, and Shadow, still calm, still alert, still guarding the little girl who hadn't said a word, but whose trembling hands told the entire story. The biker backed away, muttering something about this being crazy and overblown. But the crowd wasn't buying it. And neither was Lily's mom. She wasn't letting it go. Within minutes, local officers arrived. They reviewed the footage. They spoke to Lily. They checked Shadow's vest, confirming his K9 status. And yes, they pressed charges. The man who thought it was funny to kick a child's dog learned something that day. Not all dogs are the same. Not all little girls are defenseless. And not every act of cruelty ends without consequence. But the story doesn't end there, because what came next, what the world did with this moment, that changed everything. But the story doesn't end there, because what came next, what the world did with this moment, that changed everything. By the time the officers took the biker into custody, the videos had already started spreading. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, clips of a man kicking a girl's service dog, and the dog calmly standing his ground like a silent warrior. The internet didn't just watch, it erupted. Millions of people, strangers from around the world, saw the fear in Lily's eyes. They saw Shadow's loyalty. They saw how the man laughed, like it meant nothing. And they said, "Not on our watch." News stations picked up the story. Local girl's service dog assaulted in public park. Trained K9 officer attacked during morning walk. Within 24 hours, it was everywhere. And with every passing hour, the outrage grew louder. But something else began to happen too. Something more powerful than rage. People weren't just angry. They were inspired. They saw in Shadow something they hadn't seen in a long time: unshakable loyalty. Unspoken strength, the kind of courage that doesn't need to bark to be heard. Veterans who once worked with K9 units started sharing their own stories. Parents of autistic children with service dogs wrote emotional letters. Even law enforcement officers commented under videos, saying, "This isn't just a dog. This is a trained officer. Treat them with respect." And as the story unfolded, more details emerged. It turned out Shadow wasn't just any K9. He had served 2 years with a trauma response unit. He had helped children recover from PTSD. He had calmed panicked war veterans in hospital rooms. Shadow was trained not to fight, but to stand between chaos and calm. And that's exactly what he did for Lily. Meanwhile, the biker, now publicly identified, tried to apologize. He posted a shaky video, half smiling, half ashamed. "I didn't know it was a service dog," he said. "It was just a joke. People are overreacting." But the world didn't buy it, because it was never just about the dog. It was about what that dog represented, about how quick some people are to mock what they don't understand, to hurt what they can't control, to kick down what dares to stand tall without fear. Lily's mother, though, wasn't seeking fame or followers. She released one quiet statement: "We didn't ask for attention. We just wanted a peaceful morning." But if this story helps one more person understand the power of service animals, or stops one more reckless act of cruelty, then maybe it was worth it. And Lily, she still didn't speak, not in public, but her hands began to steady. Her breathing became softer, and when she looked at Shadow, she smiled. The kind of smile that says, "I'm not alone." The kind of smile that speaks louder than words ever could. 1 week later, a community event was held at the same park. Hundreds showed up: parents, kids, veterans, service dog handlers. Even officers from the local K9 unit arrived with their dogs all lined up, vests shining, tails wagging. They called it Shadow Day, Not to make a hero out of a dog, but to remind people that heroes come in many forms. Some wear uniforms, some wear fur, and some just stand silently beside a child who needs them most. Lily was invited to the stage, but she hesitated. Then, without being told, Shadow nudged her gently forward, step by step, until she stood in front of the microphone, and for the first time in months, in front of a quiet, hopeful crowd, Lily whispered into the mic, "Thank you for loving my friend." The audience erupted in applause. Tears fell freely, and in that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't just about a kick, or a prank, or a biker who didn't know better. This was about what happens when kindness stands up to cruelty, when loyalty faces down ignorance, when a little girl and her dog become symbols of something greater than both of them. Shadow was honored with a special medal by the local police department, a custom badge inscribed with the words, "Protector, Healer, Hero, the Biker." He faced public backlash, legal consequences, and community service. But more importantly, he became a lesson, a warning. Not every mistake gets forgotten. Not every joke is harmless, and not every dog is just a dog. As for Lily and Shadow, they continued their walks, just like before. Except now, more people waved, more people smiled, and sometimes, someone would slow down just to say, "Thank you for reminding us what loyalty really looks like." But Lily never spoke much. She didn't need to, because Shadow spoke for her in his silence, in his strength, and in the way he never once let go of the leash between them. The world had changed, not because of one man's cruelty, but because of one dog's quiet courage. And the next time someone even thought about mocking a service animal, they remembered Shadow and thought twice, because he may have looked like a pet. But he was so much more, because he may have looked like a pet. But he was so much more. Shadow wasn't just trained to protect. He was trained to understand, to stand still when fear screamed, to move forward when a heart was breaking, to sense when a child's world was falling apart, and to silently become her world instead. That's what Lily needed, not a bodyguard, not a police badge. She needed someone who saw her even when the world didn't. And Shadow did that without ever needing to say a word. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. The biker's name disappeared from the trending pages. But Shadow's story didn't go away. It grew one heart at a time. Schools began inviting K-9 units to speak to children. Veterans organizations used Shadow's footage to teach the value of service animals. Even lawmakers in Lily's state introduced a bill to increase penalties for harming registered service dogs. They named it the Shadow Act because one moment of cruelty led to a movement of protection. Because one girl's silence turned into a nation's roar, and because one dog stood still long enough to change how people saw them forever. But for Lily, it wasn't about laws or viral fame or medals. It was about the quiet, the way Shadow still waited at her door every morning, the way his head tilted every time she picked up the leash, the way he never once walked ahead of her, always beside her, always right there. One night, Lily's mother found a drawing in her daughter's backpack. It was a picture of her and Shadow. She had drawn him with wings, not angel wings, warrior wings, and under it, in shaky little handwriting, were just 4 words, "He saved my voice." Her mom didn't cry immediately. She just stared at it, because she knew what those words meant. They weren't just about the day in the park. They were about every night before it, when Lily used to scream in her sleep. And Shadow was the only one who could calm her down. They say trauma breaks people, but sometimes, if you're lucky, it introduces you to someone or something that helps you build again. That's what Shadow became. Not a shield, a bridge from silence to healing from fear to trust. One morning, months after the incident, something happened that no one expected. Lily got out of bed, put on her jacket, clipped the leash to Shadow's vest, and walked up to her mother. "Can I go to school today?" Lily nodded. Shadow stood tall beside her, calm as ever, like he already knew she was ready, not because she said it, but because he had waited with her. Through every silent storm, That morning, she walked into school for the first time in months. No tears, no breakdowns, no need to hide. Shadow walked beside her, wearing his vest with a new patch stitched on by her mom. It said, "Hope has 4 legs." The principal greeted her at the front gate. Teachers stood outside, watching in quiet awe. Some of them had doubted this moment would ever come, but here she was, not because time healed her, but because a dog stood still long enough to help her stand again. When she walked into her classroom, a hush fell over the room. Then one kid whispered, "That's the dog from the news." Another added, "That's Shadow." But Lily didn't stop. She went to her seat, looked at the teacher, and softly said, "I'm ready." And just like that, the little girl who once couldn't speak found her voice again, and the world felt it. In the days that followed, more parents asked about service dogs. More kids wrote essays about courage. One classroom even made a poster. Sometimes heroes have paws, but Shadow didn't need applause. He didn't care for headlines. All he wanted was to walk beside his girl, to guard the light that had returned to her eyes, to protect her not just from danger, but from ever feeling invisible again. And the biker, he was never heard from again, not in headlines, not in rumors. He became what all acts of cruelty eventually become, a forgotten shadow. But the dog he kicked, the child he tried to frighten, they became a story that lives on in hearts, in classrooms, in courtrooms, and in quiet walks between a girl and her hero, because the world needs to remember that sometimes the most powerful guardians don't carry weapons. They carry gentleness, they carry loyalty, they carry a leash, and walk beside the broken until they're whole again. And long after the camera flashes fade, after the interviews stop, and the world moves on to the next viral moment, there will still be one little girl and one K9 officer walking side by side down a quiet path. No words, no noise, just trust, just healing, just the unbreakable bond between a soul who was hurting and a dog who refused to let her fall. So the next time someone says, "It's just a dog," tell them about Shadow, tell them about Lily, and tell them, sometimes it's the quietest protectors who change everything.